All right, and now for something completely different. All right, it's not completely different. So I'm having a conversation with Carrie McCarpet of YouTube. Yes, YouTube fame. She probably does something else. She probably has a really interesting life and all that kind of stuff. But she's lovely and British, just the right amount of British though, not too much. You can understand her. Yeah, and she does this vegan thing, but she also does some other things, and we tend to not agree on some subjects, and so we said, well, it'd be a good idea maybe if we had a conversation about the stuff we don't agree with, because that's more fun than just saying, yes, I agree entirely with everything you just said. So that's what we're going to do, resolve our conflict. So want to say hello, Carrie?
Hello, everyone. Gary, one of the first things he said to me was, "Oh, you're a lunatic. I'm going to humiliate you completely." So I'm interested to see if you do.
Yeah, yes. Well, I can't do it completely because you are too charming for that. But theoretically, it'll be a complete annihilation. All right. If
Right.
people can see beyond the veneer that you're just too cute, then they'll understand that I've totally annihilated
Okay,
you.
but I'll
Okay.
brace myself for that.
All right. Well, today's subject is generally speaking, she's agnostic. Right? She can't figure out there's no God. So she's open to the possibility. It's within the realm of possibility that a super intelligence is watching us poo and such and saying, oh, gee, I love sports too. Do some more of that NASCAR stuff. We really enjoy it here on Alpha Centauri. Or that somehow it came from somewhere or it did something. The universe has some sort of mission, besides being just crap banging into crap. No, 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 no. There's something really interesting going on. Trust me, it's interesting. It gets interesting. Eventually. Okay, maybe not today, but someday it'll be interesting.
Blimey, I don't remember saying all that.
Okay, so I misparaphrased you. Okay, so go ahead. Explain, why are you agnostic? What makes it seem reasonable to you to leave the door open to the phantasmagorical rainbow of hope?
Well, I'm not an arrogant fool. That's basically about the size of it. You have said a few times that we're like bugs, and if we are, then you know a cockroach doesn't know algebra, and therefore I don't presume that just because it looks like when someone dies, they're switched off, because it looks like when someone's asleep, they're not there. But we know from experience that there's a lot going on when you're asleep. So I think, you just don't know what's beyond the realms of your sensory perception. And so how could you shut the door? I'm more interested to hear how you could close the door on that one.
No, telescopes, microscopes, electron microscopes, where you can see the hairs on the gnats on hairs. I mean, you can, you can see, little, tiny things, little microbes and such.
Well, we're only looking where we know where to look, though.
Well, I mean, we've looked everywhere. Go, trust me.
Okay, well,
If,
not
if
necessarily.
the,
We wouldn't have known about radio waves, for instance, and we do now. But for a long time, logic would dictate there was nothing there. So do you really presume we're at the apex of knowledge and there's nothing unknown anymore?
yes. Yeah, there's
That's a hell of a coincidence.
nothing meaningfully unknown. Okay, they have like all the
Okay.
huge equations all figured out and the basic relationship. Yeah, they might have some of the details wrong. A cat did it instead of a dog, but it's the important stuff. Yeah, we got it nailed in the sense that we look everywhere in the universe. We look really far away, 15 billion years ago. We're looking back into the future. We're seeing the dynamic, and there's nothing there happening that's a huge surprise. There's just
Well,
little surprises.
but there are still things that are unexplained, such as where does consciousness come from? And that being so tied in with this, if we have a big blank there, you can't presume we know everything.
Well, I would say that first off, it's not a mystery. We don't need to know because we know where it was made. It was made in the biological engine of evolution, and we understand its functionality. So we certainly understand why consciousness exists because it creates behavior. All right.
But what's the point of that? There's no meaning there, is there? Why does it exist? And I
Well,
don't
well,
think we do understand where it comes
well,
from.
I'm just saying, why does it exist? Because of evolution. Evolution wants you to have tools. Consciousness is a tool. So consciousness is just like a really long tooth, or a sharp pincer, or some other instrument of doom. That's what consciousness is. It's an instrument. It's a weapon that you use in the biological warfare. So an organism that has the utility to do this brainy thing of modeling the world and attaching positive and negative associations to things, so now it can modify its behavior on the go. It doesn't have to be pre-programmed. It can learn as it lives, which is a huge advantage, right? Huge advantage to being a reprogrammable machine, so you can live in different worlds and you'll still survive. So if it snows every day for 5 years, I can adapt, where another organism wouldn't be able to, because its programming says jump in the water every day.
Well, therein lies a question of why. What is this will to thrive and proliferate and diversify then?
Well,
because
you
seem to be saying there's a reason for us evolving consciousness. I can think of some, for instance, maybe plants transporting seeds. They are relying on consciousness so that an animal can move the seeds far away and give it, so I could see how perhaps it happened. But even then, we don't know why, and that's the interesting question.
Well, I think we do, though. I think that's what Darwin went to all the trouble to catalog every single organism on Earth, basically, and just go, look, see how it's totally owned by its environmental evolution. It's totally owned by environmental evolution, totally owned by environmental evolution. Everything doesn't have a will of its own. It has a will completely developed to exist in its environment, in the niche it's exploiting.
Well, that's the how, though, isn't it? It's not the why.
Well, the why is the how. That's what evolution is. So there is no. Follow
that.
Well, what do you mean? How? To say why? That's like saying, well, why do hydrogen atoms, create positive ions? I mean, there's no reason to ask why they do it. There is only how they do it. To ask why is to ask a question that you will never get a satisfactory answer to. The facts of life are the facts of life. So I'm just saying evolution is a fact of life. It is not a fact you can sit there and say, well, what mechanism created that mechanism, because there's no point. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Starting from the supposition that there's no point, and in order to conduct a reasonable scientific experiment or thought experiment, you can't start from a presupposition. You have to approach it with an open mind.
Well, I know, but I just don't think there's any... The ends make your argument for the means. You know what I'm saying? The ends of intelligence create for you, okay, the capacity to reason, and through the capacity to reason you can answer the question of why there's no purpose, or why there's no innate function, or why the universe has rules. It has rules because it has to have rules. The rules are arbitrary. The rules are part of a mechanism, but what we do know is that they're crude. They don't have intrinsic intelligence built into them. They're not deliberately creating life. They're not deliberately creating heat. They're not deliberately creating any of the mechanisms of the relationships. All of that is just what happens when you throw the rules, and then you throw a zillion little, it's like you have a zillion ball bearings. You throw them in a box, and the box has rules. And the ball bearings will do whatever the rules say it has to do.
Well, it certainly looks that way, but I wouldn't presume to know the nature of it from appearances like that. And I liked what you are compared to Schopenhauer a lot, aren't you, in your outlook? And I liked what he said about when you die, when someone dies, perhaps you don't see them anymore because you're completely limited by your brain to not see things outside your needs to survive. And so there are parts of reality beyond that. So when someone dies, they might still be around, but you just can't see them anymore. Well, I like that idea. We're very limited.
I didn't like Schopenhauer before this conversation, and now I have reason to like him even less, because that's absolute nonsense, right?
Why is it that you can't tell me why you think? What it comes down to is I don't believe we have an omniscient view or a particularly accurate view from our brain. I think it could be very limited to just keeping us alive, like it is with the other animals who can't reason and can't do things that we can. I could imagine there are things out there in the universe that have much higher intelligence than we do, given that we haven't had
like
that much of an evolutionary window.
Like what? Gremlins, pixies, fairies. I mean, what? Leprechauns,
You turn to the, childish notions of other life. I mean, it's without
Well, I'm
there
just
may
saying that
well be aliens out there.
let's say the human race has spent 10,000, realistically, let's say 10,000 years working on this, doing science thing, right? And it wasn't until maybe 500 years ago that they got really good at it. And they got really, really good at it, 150 years ago. Okay, the Industrial Revolution, all that stuff. I mean, we've learned so much, it's incrementally growing, like the speed of the computer chip, you know what I'm saying? It just keeps growing and growing, and so the rate of growth gets faster and faster and faster. And so I'm just saying that, but we do know a ton of stuff. To say we're ignorant when we have turned over so many rocks. I mean, scientists have worked for so many decades or centuries analyzing things to pieces, and there's just no evidence of intelligence anywhere in it. There's just none. And every time there is a mystery, when we find the answer is something simple, not something complicated. It's something cruder, not something more sophisticated.
But there's no evidence of intelligence in our kind either, the way we employ that science. It's like it comes without, there's no scintilla of wisdom in how we employ it, because we tend to use technology and to, unwittingly destroy ourselves. Even when it's really apparent to us, that tends to be the direction in which we're going. So looking at how stupid we are, I tend to think maybe we don't know everything then.
Well, that's just the difference. I would argue that's only a problem because, again, our brain is traveling on a monkey that owns it, okay? And the monkey has our brain in a jar, and essentially the brain is at the monkey's will, and all the brain can do is suggest humiliations to the monkey to keep the monkey in line. It can't whap the monkey or stab the monkey or really get to the monkey. It can only try to guilt the monkey or do something to humiliate the monkey's ego to control the monkey. So I'm just saying that, yes, obviously we haven't done science, we haven't used science as a tool very well, but I'm just saying the part where it's educated us, you can't do, you know what I'm saying, the facts are the facts. And obviously a lot of scientists probably didn't want the facts to go where they did, but they followed where the facts went, and that's how God ended up dead. I mean, God ended up dead because we learned better.
Wouldn't one of the humiliations include the idea that we know everything? That's the monkey talking. Because, we think we're omniscient, or we think we're not omniscient, but we think we're abreast of reality, But I don't really think there's no need for us to be, because all we're concerned with is getting food and sex and shelter, and that's what our sensory perception is limited to, really. And
I know, but you're saying there's no. I'm saying that's just a dodge, because you're going to switch what a human being is from one thing to the other thing. I'm talking about philosophically and intellectually what the world is, not what the world is from a visceral, personal, experiential point of view. So what we are, so the fact that, again, the fact that our psychology isn't mature enough to be a scientist doesn't mean that science is wrong. It doesn't mean that science is flawed. And what I'm saying is for 10,000 years we have turned over every rock in the universe just about, and you're just not going to find any evidence of any kind of redeeming functionality. Okay, we are the byproduct of abiogenesis on planet Earth. We evolved for 4 billion years. We have tools that equipped us to survive. It's a very bleak description of our creation process. It's a bastard creation. It is not a beautiful thing. It's a parasitic planet full of parasites. And that's our origin. You can't make that into any kind of rainbow.
Well, it looks like that, but if the bacteria or the cells in our body became self-aware, they would think their lives were very mundane and limited. They wouldn't probably have an idea of the higher purpose they're serving in servicing our bodies and keeping everything going. So even if the whole thing ultimately is pointless and futile and everything, there may be, and I don't care if there is or not, I don't have a fixed view on it, but I certainly think there may be a higher reason that we're driving forward. I mean, in terms of evolution, I do understand it, but sometimes I feel that there are a lot of coincidences going on in it. Sometimes I feel, I don't know if you can quite put everything down to natural selection. I mean, I do think that overall, but even the things that we know and that I agree with, I still think it still somehow seems a bit more than that. And certainly with consciousness, I don't think we know anything about that. I don't think people know how the brain generates it, as materialists would say.
Yeah, well, I'm not so convinced that it's an important thing to know. I mean, beyond the fact that we know how it works, you know what I'm saying? I mean, all you need to know about a steamroller is that it'll run you over. You don't necessarily need to know all the physical dynamics of the beast.
No, but you do need to know whether the brain generates consciousness or whether we are a sort of three-dimensional cross-section of a bigger dimensional being.
Yeah, well, I just think that's
something. So you do need to know that.
I know, but I guess I would say is that I think you can logically deduce that out of the realm of reasonable. I mean, I think you
much stock in logic. It's empiricism plus hubris. It supposes that what one thinks.
So nowhere in the forever and ever and ever you will acquire information, and you will never ever conclude that you have acquired all the information you need.
No, you have.
You will always leave the door open, so there's no conclusion to your education process, even if your education process is how many. How many? Let's go count how many ladybugs are on Earth, because we don't have that piece of knowledge yet. Maybe the mystery of the universe lies in the number of ladybugs on planet Earth. So you'll just never be complete until you have every stinking little lousy rotten detail. And I'm just saying, there's no way. We don't need the details.
We have to work as logicians or whatever and empiricists in our daily life. You have to do that. You have to assume you know certain things, because ultimately you don't even know if you exist. You don't know if what you see is a virtual reality thing. So you have to presume that it's all real. But in science, you'll never really have much rigor, because you can't really tell if what you're looking at is as it appears to you. And my problem with science is I often think they look in the wrong places. Like, when they get down to the atoms and all that, and they say, right, we understand the nature of the universe. Rupert Sheldrake makes the argument that it's like, say, an alien finding a book, putting it in a blender and analyzing what it's made of, and then thinking they know what it is when they haven't looked at the writing. They don't understand the nature of what they're looking at, and they're analyzing it in the wrong way.
Well, I would certainly agree that some science makes mistakes. I personally believe they made a huge mistake in physics 100 years ago in coming up with a wave theory of the physical dynamics, and that's completely wrong. That it is a more mechanical, kinetic universe in its origin. So I'd say they made a wrong assumption, and then they've built the whole science on those wrong assumptions. And they're atom smashers. They're not really smashing atoms. They're creating parts by smashing parts on parts. And
that's I'd love to understand your theory. I looked at it, and I need someone to sit down with me for a few hours and explain it.
Yeah, well, I'm supposed to be doing that in the videos, but yeah, I guess I better do them better then.
Well, no, maybe I'm just too thick to follow. No, what I didn't get was, but I like it. I like the sound of it. Was that photons, I think, or something, eat space? I was interested in what's the eating of space part.
Well, it just means in the sense that they migrate through it. In a sense, when something has velocity, it's moving through space. So it's obviously the matter inside of you. When anything moves, that matter is obviously consuming space in a sense. It has to, in some way, have to be eating the space that exists. So it's that's creating the fact of your movement. But your movement is really just a coalition of movement that already existed. So it's really just springs unspringing, so to speak, in the sense that
I get you.
You're already, that's the E equals MC squared thing. I could blow up many solar systems with the energy that you're made out of. The energy inside your atoms. I could blow up, huge sections of the universe with the power that's in there. So there's a bunch of movement already trapped inside of you.
Yeah.
And all you're doing essentially is migrating some of that movement in a direction when you move.
Yeah, and the way I think of the whole model is that you're also consuming time and you're also consuming consciousness. And to me, those are the three dimensions. You have one spherical dimension of space, one of time, which is, again, physical. You actually move through a physical axis. All time exists statically at once. And one of consciousness, which kind of is a spatial dimension into which potential moves and turns into reality. And so what I get a vibe, and I'm not, again, wedded to this idea, but I get a sense that your consciousness can influence what happens. I mean, what do you make of the double slit test and the fact that it appears to show that when photons are observed, they behave differently to when they're not?
Yeah, well, that's all canard. That part of the experiment is a canard. I've sort of demonstrated that never really took place. The observation versus non-observation, and it doesn't really have anything to do with observation. Obviously, observation for a photon means interaction with a photon. You can't.
Okay.
I can observe you because the photons bouncing off of you are going to be quite irrelevant to your function. Whether a zillion photons bounce off of you or a zillion and 15, it's not going to make any difference to your end destination. But if I crash a Volkswagen into you, well, that's going to significantly change how far you're going to walk and where you're going to end up, right? So, I mean, the idea that you can interact with photons is ludicrous. You can't interact with them except to throw gigantic things at them, that will force them to interact. I mean, essentially, photons will only interact with electrons, which are much bigger than photons. So, so in a sense, I'm just saying you can't observe one. It's impossible to observe one because they don't interact with anything except something bigger than themselves.
But you're bigger than a photon, so how can you...
Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, you can't interact with one. All you can do is absorb one and acknowledge you absorbed it, and then you can re-release one. But you can't in any way watch which one is doing. You can only watch, yes, you can only see them when they go from point A to point B, and you eat them at point B. You eat the photon, and then you can re-admit it. Well, I'm just saying,
doesn't the wall eat the photons in that experiment, so you can see where they ended up?
Right, but you'll never be able to see them in any position they're
in
without totally changing their behavior. So if you attempt to see them, attempting to see them means I'm going to throw, a bunch of 10-pound cannonballs at you and say, I know how you live. You know what I mean? I will not be seeing how you live. I'll be seeing how you react to cannonballs.
So your contention with it is that it produces a certain result. The result is different when you attempt to observe them, but you're not actually observing them.
Well, right, so it has nothing to do with it. Yes, I'm just saying that's the canard of it, that there is no such thing as observation. There's influence when it comes to photons. You can't observe one because there's no photon you could bounce off. Like I observe you by having photons bounce off of you and I see you. Right? Okay. Or I can hear you because, photons bounce against the membrane of the atmosphere, and the atmosphere vibrates, and then it vibrates my ear, and I hear you. You know what I'm saying? I can get information from you in ways where I don't have to hit you with something hard or as big as you. But to interact with a photon, obviously, a sound wave is substantially bigger than a photon, so I can't bounce sound off a photon.
Okay. Hang on a second. I'll be back in 1 second.
Yep. Do the Back in 1 Second show. The empty chair. So empty chair. Do you have something to say that's smarter than that babble she was talking about?
Consult my notes.
Okay. Oh yeah, notes. Well, anyway, I want to go back to your three-dimensional world. All right. The first thing I would say that time and distance are not separate dimensions. Okay, distance creates time inevitably. Distance is time is a consequence of distance. So like when a photon moves, the speed of light is the generic fundamental element of time because it's how long it takes a photon to move a certain distance that creates time.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's the slowness of photons are the fastest thing, but they're still slow. Okay, and it's their slowness that creates the illusion of time. But time isn't a dimension, because time is just the ticking off of the movement of the photons.
I don't know about that, because what is time ticking into?
Well, they can't all exist at the same time. I'm just saying there is no time existing at the same time. It's a matter of stuff moving distance, and all distance doesn't exist at the same time. So I'm just saying it has to go through this progression of time because it's the migration from one place to another place. You can't be in two places at once, so I don't believe that. There's no reason to believe it, let me just put it that way. And then obviously I don't think there's any consciousness dimension because I don't think consciousness is anything particularly special. It's a software running in our head that's creating an illusion of a reality. Okay, but it's just
Yeah.
an illusion in our head. It's one hell of an illusion, as Einstein would say about time. Einstein actually called time an illusion, but he
Well,
said,
didn't
but
he
he said it's
call?
one hell of an illusion. All right, so
Yeah.
he's conceding that even though it doesn't really exist, it's it seems like it exists just because that's the consequence of this distance thing.
I imagine he meant that, although I don't know, but I thought when he said that kind of thing that he meant it does all exist at once and the passing of time is an illusion because what it actually is you moving through a physical axis. So it seems like you're moving in a fixed direction, but actually it does exist at once and you're kind of like a pencil that's being rolled along a table. It can't go in any other direction. It's just forced to, and so time
I
appears
know,
like an
but at
arrow.
once is just where you kind of gave it away. That it can't be something that can exist at different times because there is this idea of it is here and then it is there.
But from our
You
point of view,
can't.
yeah.
Well, I think from any point of view, there's just no way to make distance be instantaneous. So distance would have to be instantaneous, and if it's instantaneous, then nothing can move. So I'm just saying it creates a not a duality, but a dilemma of consistency.
But
So you
far
can't
away
have it.
exists. I don't get this distinct because far away I think does exist just as near exists, and it both exist at the same time, don't they?
Well, I know, but far away is just the idea of how long it would take you to get there. And the point is if you tried to go far away, it would take you 15 billion, let's say if it's 15 billion light years away, it would take you 15 billion light years to get there. Even
But
though,
it exists in its own right.
huh?
It exists in its own
It did
right.
exist, but I'm just saying that you could say that the light coming off of something that was 15 billion years ago, and the thing doesn't exist anymore. The light is just an illusion of what it
Okay.
was.
So, you,
So
so
the reality is that it doesn't exist now. So I'm just saying that you can't really blow up to put time in one dimension that is somehow happening all at once would be essentially to take away the character of time. The
I see what you're
character of
saying. Yeah.
time is that it's not instantaneous. So it does take time for time to tick off. So you can't make it
Okay. So
instantaneous.
time is like a very temporal dimension by which it's ticking all the time, in which action is allowed to happen without
Well, yeah,
the
but
ticking
I would
of
still
that
argue that
action.
it isn't a thing in itself. It's just a consequence of distance at a speed. So as soon as you
Okay.
have it, as soon as you have distance at a limited speed, that you can't go from point A to point B except at the speed of light, at the fastest. Well, then you've created time. So I'm just saying time is just a symptom of distance.
And it's a symptom of movement as well, am I right? It's like
Well, that's all I'm
it's
saying. The distance would be movement. Implying that distance is movement. So distance is going from one place to another place. It's going to inevitably take time to do that. So time is just a symptom of the fact that you moved somewhere
yeah.
from a point A to a point B. So
Well, what my thinking is that it certainly looks like that to us. My thinking is that it does all exist at once, and it's an illusion of movement that happens in the brain. So I have a reductive view of humans and think that we can't perceive time as it is. So it appears like it's a ticking temporal style dimension. But actually it's as spatial as the one that we know is spatial. And I
well,
think consciousness is the same.
the only concession I might make to something like that is I would say that there's from a photon's point of view, from the speed of light, from the speed of light's point of view.
Yeah.
Okay, the words I just said, the last 4 seconds of this interaction was essentially a billion years of time to them. Okay, from their point of view, from that point of view, there would be a ton of interactions that take place in that 4 seconds. So we're obviously moving incredibly slowly by comparison to the core of the universe. So the small universe is moving really, really fast. The big universe is moving really, really slow. And we're sitting there in the middle, moving at at our regular speed. But that's really the only dimension, is that I'm just saying that, yes, by comparison to the photon, our speed is preposterously slow. And there's a huge amount of stuff happening through every millisecond.
Yeah.
millions of years of stuff happening by comparison of what's really changing.
And we know that each person is on their own timeline, effectively. Would you agree with that? From relativity,
no,
if a person gets on a plane, they age slower than a person on the ground. So effectively, we must be on our own timelines.
Yeah, well, the age slower thing is kind of it's not really the right way to look at it. Your metabolism, yes, moves slower, but on an airplane, it's such a small amount of change that it can't have any effect. And if I did start accelerating you faster, it's not like you're going to maintain the integrity of your systems, because your systems will essentially, it will be corrosive to your existence rather than beneficial. You're not coming back.
I'm not arguing.
I'm just saying.
Vogue point of view. I mean, the significant science seems to suggest that even if it's like a millisecond or a fraction of a millisecond, still it says that we're on our own timeline.
Well, what I'm saying though is I don't believe there's your own time. Okay, there's one time, there's one clock at the base of the universe, and that's the speed of light. And those ticks, those Planck constants of distance that are traveled in a Planck constant of time, that fact remains true in every single place in the universe. So there's no one who can escape that time reference. There's one clock that's accurate. The rest of the clocks
I don't think, because doesn't relativity say that if you were to fall into a black hole, for instance, time for you would stop?
Yeah, well, I believe Einstein was fundamentally wrong. Yeah, I don't believe in relative velocity or relative time. So I don't think either one of those are accurate. But regardless, because it doesn't make any sense first. I mean, first, on its face, if you take those to their logical conclusion, you have these idiotic paradoxes where you go back in time and kill your own father.
Not necessarily. If consciousness is also a dimension, then the implication is that the person you were in the past isn't you now. And it certainly, to me, seems that experientially that I'm not the same person consciously as I was then. The only thing that unites us is memories, which might be forged in matter. And we could be like a long centipede of time, memory, and matter.
I'll make a simpler argument then. I mean, I still can argue that, but I'm just saying I could just say it breaks cause and effect. Okay, so that's all I would say, is that it just breaks cause and effect, because all of a sudden causes are not causes, and you know what I'm saying. It breaks the chain because now you're changing the mechanism by which it works through. You know what I'm saying? That there's this barrier between one person's time and another person's time wouldn't make any sense, in my opinion, because you'd just be changing something's reality for an arbitrary reason because it passed through a barrier, and there's no explanation of why that barrier would exist and how it changes time. So it doesn't make any sense from my perspective as a cause and effect thing. It just breaks the chain of cause and effect. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, I just say, okay, fine, whatever, that exists. I'm just saying that in itself doesn't say anything about evolution. It doesn't say anything about consciousness, again, being built as a tool. It's not a mechanism. I mean, you can see it in some other organisms where they're mechanical. Okay, they have a mechanical intelligence. I could argue that the Venus flytrap has a brain of a kind, but it's not a brain that's conscious. It's not a brain that's thinking about doing anything. It's just a mechanical kind of intelligence, is that you trigger point A, this chemical does this does that closes this. There's absolutely no thinking, there's no anything, there's just behavior. And the point is that's exactly what our brain is built to do, is just create behavior. It's not built to create experience. It's built to interpret the environment and react to it. It's a reflex. Our brain is just reflexes in a chain.
But that contradicts your idea that we do have a good idea of what's going on, because if we are just designed to survive, basically, how can we have much confidence in our science being comprehensive when it's very limited to just what's going to keep humans alive?
No, it doesn't have any limit. There's no limitation at all. It's our brain is made to model the world we live in. So you can live in an intellectual world where you're pursuing truths that have nothing to do with your personal survival or your personal welfare. So like a wolf would analyze trees and understand how to run around them, what things he can run through, what things he can run over. His brain is analyzing things key to his environment and keys to his being able to catch rabbits. So his brain is focused on a model that's a very narrow personal model. obviously as humans, okay, because we have acquired language and done all this stuff, we can understand more abstract causes, more abstract goals, more things that are not necessarily to our own interest in any way. We can pursue those. We can devote our modeling brain to modeling that reality. So I can model reality in my brain, not my reality, but the universe and the microverse, and I can use my brain to model all kinds of things that don't have anything to do with me personally.
I do have a sense that that capacity is limited in all of us, because if it wasn't, we would effectively now be at the end of science, and I think science has a long road ahead of us. I don't put stock in logic because, like 100 years ago...
What science do you think there's... Let's say we cure cancer and we have the iPod 4000. We're still going to be the same ape. I mean, what are you going to do besides live out a soap opera? Is there something else to do besides just come up with another version of Star Wars? And Star Wars was just a version of a Shakespeare play, right? I mean, what new formula of cereal? I mean, what you're going to put? Okay, instead of moons and shiny stars made out of marshmallows, you're going to add a 7th and an 8th marshmallow to your Lucky Charms. But I mean, there's nothing here. There's nothing to work with. We're just devices seeking entertainment. We're not.
I think, well, intellectually, I certainly feel that, and that's why I'm so fucking lonely and struggle to find a reason to live. But if we were, I do think that humans would do well to live in a more visceral, emotional way, because really, that's the only game in town. Really, I mean, that's the only joy is through being animals again. Love, sex, food. Those are the only real joys.
The tragedy that comes with that, and the heartbreak of psoriasis or whatever you want to call. I mean, come on, go look at how chimpanzees live. Okay, the babies die. Stuff happens every day. I mean, every day is your best friend is gone. I mean, real horror, and it's happening all the time in their lives. Okay, where they have no control over this stuff, and they're just sitting there with a bag of loss. It's just gone. Yeah, I frankly wouldn't want to live 10 seconds as just an animal trapped emotionally, being emotionally pulled, by the environment. I mean, I find that, just a horrible thought.
I know, again, we wouldn't want to live that way, but we wouldn't, would we? Because we're used to this way. And I certainly don't want to go and just live in the jungle. But sometimes I think, it can seem pointless. Life can seem pointless because our human endeavor is pointless for the most part. Even technology, which unites us all in this way, wouldn't be necessary if we lived together and we lived in communities and had love, because the internet is probably... about love. It's about wanting to reach out to people. And if we lived in a more natural way, certain needs would be answered that we're having to answer through technology. So what I'm getting at is life seems pointless because what we do is pointless. But where I find meaning sometimes is in the emotional stuff, love, and it's a total surrender to your animalistic nature when it's romantic love or familial love or whatever, but that still seems to me when you're the most alive, when you feel hate or fear or any of that, but nothing afforded by the modern world gives me a massive emotion, really.
Well, I'm not even expecting it to, so I guess I would argue that I certainly don't live my personal, visceral fantasy life in the real world, because, it doesn't offer you anything of meaning in terms of your personal ego and, defeating Darth Vader or something. Yeah, so it's not giving you any of those things, but that's not its job, I would almost argue. And again, I would just argue that the formula of the sitcom, whatever it is, the soap opera you need to get addicted to, is just so formula that you can just make up any kind of dopey story and then live it, and then fine, you've done your little visceral passion thing. So
what else? That's just the best I can come up with. I don't think it's very good, but and by the way, I don't do it. I don't live that. It just seems like the best. But I'm the type who's gone into the corporate world, less so. I'm kind of moving out now, but I did all the stuff that is pointless. So it's not that this is my personal motto. I'm just coming to that conclusion that there's not really much, there's not really much point in what modernity seeks, because it just seeks to grow constantly, and there is probably more point.
Well, I know, but you're making too, that's the generalization I don't care for, is this idea of calling all modernity the same thing. Okay, I mean, all of it is Coke cans or something. The only reason why scientists went to the moon was to invent Tang. I mean, those are just, those are nice rhetoric, okay, if you want to diss somebody. But the fact is that most science is done with the pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of an understanding, and the the facts. So the fact that they use their facts, the fact that Monsanto might put their use of this information to evil purposes, or write small print on grains of wheat. The fact that somebody will use it badly, has nothing to do with the idea of acquiring the information and the knowledge. So I'm just not going to throw both of them in the same bucket and say the knowledge is bad because humans put it to bad purpose. Well, the fact that humans will put anything to bad purpose doesn't matter. They put the first rock on a stick to bad purpose.
Yeah.
Right? They put their fist to bad purpose, right? You don't think cavemen were whacking the bitches? They just shut up, bitch, boom.
Yeah. That's where I think it can all be blanketed under that description of, once you have disproportionate influence over your environment, most animals don't. They're limited by their physical form, so they can only eat what they can catch with their claws or whatever. But once you have the first stick, you have disproportionate influence over your environment, and that, to me, is the fall from grace, the fall of your destiny from nature's hands.
Well, I don't think it's a destiny in the first place. I don't think it's inevitable. I think we could have used it well. We could have done civilization better. We just happened not to, okay? But it wasn't, and it could have just been for stupid reasons that we didn't do it better, okay? But we did it badly, and we don't have enough, and we don't have enough time, right? I mean, humans have been around a short while, but obviously our power keeps increasing faster than our intelligence is increasing, our ability to understand how to use things. And again, if we just have, simple things, I think would have solved the problem. If we would have just said, look, this intelligence thing is important, and there's going to be a point where, you'll be in a different, civilization creates a cage of sorts. You know what I mean? It sort of cages us all and says, this you can do, this you can't do. Okay, this is how we become civilized. And there's some people who belong in bigger, stronger cages, narrower cages. And we never decided to do that. We're just saying that every human is entitled to their opinion and every human's entitled to their action. And that just leads to a bunch of people breeding kids on garbage piles. And so, if you have a human race that was that is raised in ghettos and garbage piles, well, then your human race isn't going to be worth much.
I am impressed by the fact you opt out of that stuff. The only reason I don't opt out of it is because I fear that I would be lonely, basically, and I feel like I wouldn't gain anything more by opting out. I mean, because you don't buy into having kids and stuff like that. I think I'm with you on that, in that I wouldn't mind having kids, but I don't think it's right. Somehow I don't think it's right.
I didn't even need a complex philosophy to have that opinion, though. I'm just saying that was already a given to me just by the simple observation that I don't have enough control. Okay, and without control, how can I put something precious in a rowboat, shove it, push the rowboat out, and I don't have control over the weather? I'm just saying that there's no way. There's no way I could. It was like an egg. I knew I couldn't put in my hand without crushing it, and so it was already something that was verboten, just for the simple reason that I can't control what's going to happen to it, and if I can't control what's happening to it, I'm not messing with it, because I don't want its ruin on my hands.
Well, I do admire that, because it comes at the price of fucking loneliness, doesn't it? I mean, Don't you feel lonely? You told me you are capable of exercising that kind of practical sense, even when dealing with romantic relationships, where you think, well, this isn't good for them or for me or whatever, so you won't go through with it. Whereas I would just be dragged along behind my heart and just like, well, let's see what happens. And so I do it.
Well, I know. Well, I guess risk aversion is just, like I said, that's just when you've been humbled enough to know what the consequences of, say, error is, and you say there's, you'll be like a doctor who says first do no harm, and you just make it a law. You're just basically saying, well, this is the law. You've got to try to do this first, do no harm thing, and then you have luxury or liberty outside of everything else is your liberty. But this is a rule, and so I'm just saying these are just basic rules about this idea that, I'm more risk averse than I am greedy or gluttonous for a gratification that I also know comes with its own snares. The rose and the thorn. You know what I mean? The beauty and its death. Maybe I don't want to be addicted to the rose and then have to watch the rose, the petals wither and die and fall off. And I mean, I'm just saying that the fact that life is so rude to beauty just makes it another thing where you almost don't want the image of beauty because, reality is going to shit on it. The birds are going to poo on it, and it's going to be disgraced, and it's going to be turned into rubbish and rubble.
But it is defined by its temporary nature. Life would be meaningless if it, for instance, never ended, because everything would be dwarfed to equal significance by eternity. And similarly...
Well, I know, but by your own argument, you would have an endless number of ladybugs to count. So you'd always have something to do. So to say you would be dwarfed out of business, no, you could just rewrite the book you wrote. You know what I'm saying? You could just decide arbitrarily, well, I wrote the book of everything, and now I'll just rewrite it. So you could just start over.
I know. Well, that depends on one's temperament, I suppose. But I want to say is beauty sometimes contextualized by the negative. The fact that it's temporary makes it more precious and more beautiful. So I don't think harm is necessarily always bad. I mean, some of the worst things that have happened to us have probably made us better people. Even though I really don't want to go through it, it sometimes is the engine of growth or a positive thing.
Yeah, well, the cat doesn't agree at all.
What's the cat?
No, the cat just says, screw that, it's all psychology. I mean, obviously that's, in my opinion, okay, we could even talk about free will or something. No, I mean, this thing that we call a human psychology, again, is just formula. And, I just don't buy this argument that there's some bigger purpose than this natural, instinctive package of ambition and desire and ego and vanity and even the ability to perceive beauty. But perceiving beauty is essentially in an expression of not avarice. What would be the right word for it? But it's desire. It's a horniness. Okay, we're horny for it. Are hungry for it. It's a mechanism where we need it. Not that it earned. Yes, it's an appetite created inside of us that wasn't rationally said, okay, this would be a good description of beauty, right? I mean, beauty should be the cure of a disease or the fixing of a broken, or, what I'm saying? We should be, if we were to rationally describe what is beautiful is, preventing the war, or, something that prevents the harm and the suffering. So, beauty is penicillin or something. It's not. It's not. By reason, it wouldn't be something this superficial.
You say that we're entrapped by our psychology, which I agree with, and that's what makes me an agnostic. The fact that I think I can't know anything beyond my psychology. I can't transcend my own psychology. So there's a paradox in what you say, because you say we're trapped by it, and yet I know anyway that logically there's no point to this. It certainly looks like there's no point. I would agree with you on that. But I have hope that outside that could be something beyond my psychology. I can't...
well, again, I just, I'm not going to agree with that description in the sense that I don't think intelligence, knowledge acquisition, is psychology. So I'm just saying that the knowledge we've acquired is what points to this truth that, gremlins and fairies and leprechauns and rainbow gold and all of that crap those are just happy thoughts. They're not real thoughts. They're not real thoughts. They're just happy thoughts. They're wishful thinking. They're not rational thinking. And that if you really look at the mechanism makes assassin beetles. The mechanism makes AIDS viruses. The mechanism makes funguses that eat ant brains. That's what the mechanism makes. It doesn't make fairies and gremlins and...
It might do. See, that's where we differ because I, on principle, have such an open mind. I used to work for David Icke, who believes that there are the Queen's a lizard and stuff, and he literally believes it, I think, although when questioned, sometimes I get the feeling he's saying it's an analogy. But anyway, but I think on principle, I will listen to somebody like that. I'll listen to their arguments and think about what he's saying then. Whereas most people would say, I'm not listening to this idiot, But on principle, even though it seems highly unlikely to me, I feel that's the way to go about life, because otherwise you're going to miss out on some tangent of knowledge that you weren't looking for, because you were only looking for stuff within your own limited...
I'm just saying there's no real evidence of that being true in the world, okay? The astrology is proven to be nonsense or some association. I mean, even real hard science gets messed up.
I don't know about that. Astrology, I mean, take the female's menstrual cycle, right? Now listen, there's a reason that I think it syncs up with the moon. It must be something to do with fertility.
The moon isn't really astrology, so that's cheating, okay?
Well, I'm saying, but I'm trying to make a point that what might have happened with the female cycle is that you're most fertile at one point, and maybe humans are a species who like to mate in the dark to do with the fact they know what sex is about, and that maybe you have to do it in secret, so there's, it's my child, and so maybe there's secret affairs. Anyway, if it was something to do with we like to mate in the dark or we like to mate in the light, the cycle of the moon and how light nights are could have something to do with when people procreated successfully. And it makes sense that this vast body in the sky, therefore, has the same cycle as women who menstruate, like that, because the ones who were always fertile when it was dark would pass on more genetics, or the ones who were always fertile when it was light. So what I'm saying is I think big things in the sky can influence us.
That's like an appendix or something. I mean, that's just vestigial stuff. I mean, you can go back to fish, some of the most primitive fish on Earth. Okay, and yes, their cycle is dictated by the moon because it's dictating the tides, and they lay the eggs further up on the shore if they, mate at high tide. The highest possible tide gives their children the best possibility of survival. So it's clearly just an environmental mechanism that's imposed on them. And clearly some of that stuff can be retained because it has some sort of biological function. But I'm just saying, once you get out of the insect realm, I'm going to say you're going to have a hard time finding an organism that's going to be limited by moon cycles, because there's going to be much better reproductive strategies. I mean, wackier ones even. I mean, even like, I often use it as an example. There's birds that collect blue things, right? So the male collects a bunch of blue crap, okay, builds a crap house out of blue shit, right, just to impress the female, right? So he spends most of his energy, right, building a blue tower to impress the female that, look how much free time I have. I am got it so together that I can waste a month. I can waste an entire month collecting blue crap to impress you. That's how cool I am. And so it's really just a test, right? It's just a strength test. And so, the bird wins because he gets to mate. But look at it. It's just preposterously stupid. There's nothing brilliant in that, okay? It's just a waste of the bird's energy. It's a silly standard by which to judge. And
no sillier than the human ones, I guess. But I think what I'm saying with that is that big bodies in the sky can influence us in ways that we wouldn't have thought. I mean, I've never seen that.
Okay, well, I'm just saying that obviously I would say that, yes, I'll grant your argument to the moon because the moon's gravity actually affects us in a very physical way. But I'm just saying everything else's gravity is so limited in its, the influence it has on us. Even Venus doesn't have much of a gravitational influence, and if it has any, it's only every 4 years. So I'm just saying that, you can't use, if you waited 4 years to mate, you're not going to live, you're not going to survive the competition. So I'm just saying that the idea of astrology, I just meant astrology as this, we see the images in the clouds or something, and then we invent a religion based on what, what shape the clouds take. What you see in the cosmos, what connect the dot kind of images you can make out of it. it's just nonsensical to say this has something to do with our existence. It has nothing to do with our existence beyond the fact that we are looking for cartoon characters to pray to.
Well, it seems like that, but I would always maintain this element of doubt and say I could believe that Saturn or something could influence us in a way I don't understand. And I agree, it wouldn't be gravitational like the moon's, or light like the moon might affect women, but it might be something I don't understand, because without technology, without science, I wouldn't be aware of a lot of things like radio waves, microwaves, all that kind of thing.
Well, I understand all that, but I'm just saying, this is still just a measure of your confidence in this stuff. So you're just saying, because I can really bend and warp my perception into an insane kind of perspective, I can make some sort of sense out of a gremlin existing. But I'm just saying, you're going to have to make it. Well, I'm just saying that's all you're doing, though. You're just saying that if I really put something real on the line, I mean, if I put a little kitten on a table, and I said, okay, let me see how strong your belief is, okay? So if you believe it's really true, then we squish the kitten because that truth is bigger than the kitten, you know what I'm saying? Or, you know, some kind of contest like that, then maybe this stuff all disappears, right?
No, but I would come down to one truth that I totally believe, which is my experience is limited to that thing. I think, therefore I am, and I don't know anything beyond that, because I sometimes
Well, why bother thinking then? Why bother I-aming through the process of thinking and then keep claiming you're too stupid to think? You're just saying, I'm too stupid, I'm too stupid, I can't, no, don't make me make a decision, I'm too stupid, I'm too stupid, I'm too stupid.
My surrender to the experience of living is me saying, okay, I'll bite. I'm not too stupid. I'm just saying one can never know for sure anything, and I would have the squish kitten test on that. I do feel that convicted that perhaps everything is virtual reality. I really think it could be sometimes, most of the time not, obviously. But yeah, I don't think we can know anything. So I don't try and make models of anything. I just have an open mind about stuff.
I just don't know why you have an open mind to stuff you know is based on wishful thinking and wishful thinking alone. No evidence. Well, there's no evidence. I'm just saying there's no evidence of any of this. There's only evidence of a material universe, a clockwork universe, of mechanical forces that are grinding out sunlight and grinding out an environment that exists, and that through 4 billion years, you know, cause and effect, you know, inevitable circumstances created this whole stupid facade of an entity who's all full of himself and think, I'm smart and I'm clever, I'm human, I'm doing thinking things really cool, I'm really cool, I'm like a god in the universe, and I can look at stuff, and I can say pretty, and I can say ugly, and I can be a racist, and I can be all kinds of silly crap. So what? I mean, it's a mechanical rigmarole. It's just a Rube Goldberg, right? You know what a Rube Goldberg device is, right? It's one of these things where the bowling ball rolls down, and it hits the cat's tail, and then the cat meows, and it knocks the spoon over, and the spoon hits the duck, and, you know, that's all this whole thing is. It's just one colossal clusterfuck of bullshit, and you're sitting here in the middle of the pile of it, and you're watching the most bullshit organism in the history of the universe, right? The human liar. You're just watching the human race full of crap, right? He kills children to watch a Super Bowl. I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's just preposterously stupid. Runs race cars around in circles and crashes and does all kinds of just, you know, kills each other for Cabbage Patch dolls. Like, oh, I'm going to get my Cabbage Patch doll. I'm going to trip that bitch. You know, you're watching this ludicrous show. The most ludicrous, you know, Dawkins, the greatest show on earth? No, the most ludicrous show on earth. Is the human race on the top, is the cherry on the biggest pile of crap ever crapped by the universe. Life is crap, and we are the cherry on the crap. Where
we differ is that you think we can know everything from our judgment. I don't think we can.
Everything is not what we need to know. We just need to know enough. I say we can know enough, and that we've crashed right into the enough wall. We've got it, okay? We're a wacky psychology playing a stupid, shitty game, and we're pretending it's all for a function and a purpose, and it's just demolition derby. No one's going to really win. No one leaves alive. It's just freaking stupid.
Well, I don't think we know enough logically, because looking back at science, if there's one common theme, it's that
I know, but
nobody
you're
ever knew
looking
enough.
back. You're looking back. Of course, yeah. I can look back at me in grammar school and I can say, man, I was an idiot. I could look
Yeah.
back at me when I was, in kindergarten and I could say, oh, what an asshole, what an idiot I
Yeah.
was.
So
I mean,
what
sure,
I'm
it's really
saying is
easy to
that
look back because that's what we had to do. We had to learn the hard way. There was nobody to teach us. That's one of the whole points here. There's no intelligence in the universe. We had to figure it out all on our own. And I'm
don't you
saying
think
we
when
have figured it out, and I'm just saying now you're you're not going to accept that you figured it out. You're just going to say
no,
I didn't graduate. I didn't.
I know, I certainly, I knew more, I know more than I did then, but the difference between us is when I'm 70, my image of me when I'm 70 is that I will look back now and I will be the idiot that I'm laughing at then, whereas you seem to think you're at a plateau and when you're 70, you won't know any more
Well,
than
I
you do
will
now.
say that I haven't learned anything significant in the last 10 years, right? I mean, I've been on YouTube and arguing with people, and the only thing that I'd say that I learned in those 10 years, or those 8 years, 9 years, whatever it is, one guy sort of said something, and I said, yeah, I have more power to influence you than I have power to influence me. It's almost
Yeah,
like a free will argument where, yeah, I can fuck with your head, but I can't
yeah,
fuck with mine because mine's already fucking me. So I can't
yeah.
do it. You know what I mean? I can't do anything to change me.
Well, yeah, well, listen,
Okay?
don't
Because
you find,
I'm going to do that. But I can mess with your head. And so that
well,
was
don't, yeah.
one little, so there, that's it. That's all I've learned in 10 years.
But don't
Okay?
you find some good meaning in that? Because I've often thought how ludicrous it is that the greatest feelings you can experience basically have to come from someone else, and it's like they are operating your body because you can't feel love without someone else. So that is an argument
Well, the
to.
the button pushing issue is a whole nother conversation. But yeah, the irony is that I can't tell somebody how to push the buttons because then it wasn't honest. You know what I mean? So that's another catch of the whole thing, right? Is that I know the sequence, but if I tell them the sequence, well, then they might be doing it just to shut me up, or you know what I mean? It won't be
Yeah, but
sincere. So
have
you
you ever
want
had?
to have this sense that it's real and it's genuine without having to overtly say, just don't do this or just don't do that. Because if you actually have to tell somebody not to do it, well, then you
Get to
fuck it
do
up. You
stuff.
take all the charm out of it, right? Because you want it to happen naturally. But I'm
I
just
know.
saying that's an irony of our psychology again. That's again
Have
the
you
psychology
ever?
of
Have you ever
trust.
had anyone do all the stuff and you didn't even know that stuff? Haven't you had anyone turn up in your life where they do all incredible stuff that you didn't even know about? You couldn't even have told them because they're so great that they do stuff you don't even imagine until they turn up. You haven't had that.
No. No, I've never been too impressed. So,
No,
by
well,
by by
that's
people, and I've certainly not been, I haven't been. My disappointment in the human race has not been converted into some hope that, yes, well, there was that guy. There
yeah.
haven't been too many of those surprises that tell you, okay, there is some hope that there's a game to play here.
Who do you admire then, philosophically or
Me,
artist?
me,
What you
me,
know?
me, 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 me,
What about
me.
Leonardo da
Me.
Vinci?
Well, look, of course I admire people who worked hard and did the shit, and came up with the answer. I love that stuff. That's great. So, yeah, I'm all for that. But what can I say beyond the fact that I say, yeah, great. But I'm just saying that we know that just as I am a product of cause and effect, I didn't make me. I'm a byproduct. He was a
Hmm.
byproduct of his environment, too. So I'm just saying I don't mind applauding. Good job,
Yeah.
fantastic. But I'm just saying I don't know whether I gained any insight, right? Because number one, he was living by comparison with the average man, he did exceptionally well. He
Mhm.
was that exceptional, whatever the Renaissance man. Okay, so yeah, by comparison to humans of his time, he was incredibly exceptional. So great, fantastic. But I don't know what do you want me, I can put a badge on him or something. But
No,
I'm just saying,
but I'm just wondering where what interests you, because someone who's done good stuff that's a contemporary is, I think, Richard Dawkins. I really don't like his attitude about religion, but I do like what he did about on genetics, and he made it quite easy to understand. And I mean, do you admire him?
well, I don't only because I just see the guy is supposed to know evolution and he doesn't seem to know evolution. So I'm just saying Yeah, he's made a great contribution instead of the selfish gene, understanding,
Yeah.
understanding meme evolution even. You know,
Yeah.
the idea that our conversation could be viral. You know, an
Yeah.
idea could be viral. So he sort of began that kind of conversation that there's an evolution of ideas and an evolution of philosophy that takes place in a different realm, and it evolves by a different standard, you know, a different kind of evolution. But it is just like evolution in the sense that it evolves through subtle changes as it migrates through a human population, like a spiral or something or something. So yeah, that's all great stuff. But I'm just saying the price you pay for that is his glib attitude towards the
Yeah.
horrors in nature. And I just think, you know, to sit there and call what took place through evolution the greatest show on earth
No, I know.
is
Yeah.
a metaphor I just find worthy of vomit. I mean, it's a disgusting, glib minimization of the you know, the incomprehensible price that has been paid for our existence. Our existence has cost 500 million years of sentient organisms being horrifically dismembered, horrifically disease infected, horrifically consumed alive. It's a frickin' bloodbath.
Yeah, but then, the thing that I would rationalize it with purely to console myself, I recognize that, is that, childbirth is a violent, sort of horrific thing, but it's okay. You'd say childbirth was okay, wouldn't you? And
I
death
wouldn't,
may
I
be
wouldn't,
that
I
too.
wouldn't do it on a bet. I mean, as a male, and I can't imagine why women put up with it. I certainly
But
wouldn't.
I'm just like, death might be one of those horrible transitions, but it could be a transition into something else, and they're all bloody violent. But
Well, I'm just saying, I personally can't understand that logic at all. So, I mean, there's people who will ride roller coasters they know are iffy. You know what I'm
yeah,
saying, that they could get killed on, and they'll just say, well, it's fun. Well, it's fun until you're paralyzed. So I guess to ask them after they're paralyzed. So, I mean, there's plenty of women who have gone through pregnancy and said, shit, I'll never do that again because it was just
yeah.
horrible. So it's not like all of you are insane. Once in a while, one of you says, wow, that surely was stupid. I won't do that again because that was a dumbass thing to do.
Well, pain is just a sign that something's wrong, isn't it? I do think pregnancy's got worse and worse because we live in an unnatural way, and it was probably easier, and labour was easier before. But pain isn't bad in itself, is it? It's just horrendous to the person or thing that it's happening to. And I'm like you, I don't eat animals, and
Bad
I
in
don't
itself.
want,
I
I
don't know
want to
how
avoid
well, if
pain.
it's bad to the person it's happening to, it might as well be bad to me. What's the difference? There's no difference between
Yeah.
them and me. So I'm just saying it's silly to say it's only bad to the person it's happening to. You mean it's only bad to the sentient organism experiencing the
No,
horror?
no,
So I
I'm
mean,
not saying that. I'm saying that it's there to tell you to do something different. It's
well,
a sign to do
whether
something
it's there to
else. And
tell you
it's
something,
a guide. It's a
it's
teacher.
irrelevant. It's meaningless. If my leg is broken, I don't need pain to tell me my leg is broken. I mean, let my leg, little flag pop out in front of my eyes that goes, your leg is broken. I mean, it really doesn't need to put me through horrific pain to tell me my leg is broken. Duh, I know
If
that.
you had
I mean,
chronic pain,
well, I know, yeah. Well, if my pancreas has got a frickin' tumor growing on it, what good is it to torture me? I can't do anything about it. I can't tear the tumor off, so why bother having pain?
do you have pain? I mean, what's your predicament? Are you okay? Are you going to be all right?
What do you mean? Well,
Well,
I'm not
did
going
you
to be all
say?
right. I'm alive, so I'm obviously going to be dead
Did you
eventually.
say if your pancreas
Yeah,
had?
yes, exactly. I don't have a tumor on it right now.
Oh, that's what I thought you were just telling me,
As
like
far
a
as I
way to win an
know,
argument.
as far as I know, I don't have one. But I'm just saying, I'm just saying that you can take anything, a sciatic nerve problem or some other thing. I'm not saying that there isn't some. I'm not saying that it doesn't have evolutionary purpose. I'm just saying the fact is it sucks. It can be extremely horrific. Okay, unsoothable pain is a horrible way to live. Chronic pain is a horrible way to live, and I'm just not going to minimize it by saying some stupid thing that's all worth it. Well, I don't think it's all worth
But
it.
it's the only way of stopping an organism from harming itself, not hurting itself, but from harming itself. I mean, it's a guide for you.
Again. I just saying that no. A little headache is fine. Okay, give me a little headache. Okay, but we know that little headaches aren't what you get. You get some kind of horrible headache and you're puking your guts out and all this other shit's happening. Why have that? What good is that doing you? It's not doing you any good. Just making
No,
you close. It's bringing you closer to death. It might kill you then. The symptoms are going to kill you. I mean, that's
so,
in most diseases. It's not the disease that's killing you. It's the symptoms of the disease that are killing
yeah.
you.
So tell me, where do you find purpose then, and what would you advise other people is the best kind of purpose we could pursue, given the limitations?
Well, obviously, the only purpose, in my opinion, I mean, you're stuck in this game, okay, like a chessboard. Okay, let's just say this is the game, it's chess. Okay, you're a pawn. You know that the king doesn't really exist. He's just a pawn in fancy suit, right? So they're all really just pawns. They're all just things being manipulated to jump on spaces and knock things over. And you say, okay, well, let's knock each other over as gracefully as possible. Let's not kill each other until you're dead. Okay, when you're dead, I'll kill you. Okay, when you're dead, I'll take your space. But I won't take it until you die. Okay, or something. You know what I'm saying? So we'll just
Live peacefully.
Well, I'm just saying we can minimize the losses. So that's the first
Yeah.
the first thing I'm going to argue is first do no harm. That is, don't make any new pieces to screw up the game.
Don't have
Okay.
children.
Second, try to moderate against the way the game's being played, so it's all more graceful. So we gracefully slide the pieces off the board. And once you've gracefully got them all off the board, yeah, just don't put any more in this because it's a stupid game. So yeah, don't make any more messes.
Whereas I would say just go blindly through life, led by your instinct, seek pleasure and seek to help others, find purpose in helping others.
You have to grow a big Nietzsche mustache. Well, Nietzsche wouldn't even say that, though. Okay, I'll grant you that. Nietzsche wouldn't say others matter. He would say they're food for your mega beast. You know, grind them up because they're no good for the gene pool anyway.
Well, I would say we got similarities because we don't want to do harm. And even though I believe in, I entertain the idea there could be a bigger purpose and all that, I still have this feeling that it will be the same fear you have that stops me from having children. The fear that I can't help them. I can only bring them there and then I can't control it beyond that. And but I think people can find purpose in helping others avoid pain and making their lives better, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, but then the whole perception thing of what you're creating when you're creating a human being anyway, you don't even have control over its psychology. You know what I mean? It's like you're not even creating somebody who has likes and dislikes like your own. Like you could say to me, it's worth it, the world the way it is. It has enough cupcakes. Yeah, it's got some knives in it, but I'm okay with those. But then your kid could be completely obsessed with the knives, and he completely hates cupcakes. Yeah. So the world he's going to live in, or she, would be totally obnoxious to them because they're not going to live by your standards. They're going to live by whatever their standards are. So the world you're living in that has enough cupcakes in it isn't going to have enough cupcakes. They're going to want a world that's completely different than the world you're living in, and they might find it very difficult to grind through existence because they're going to be sensing things you didn't sense. They're going to be feeling things you didn't feel. So even that element of it's not even that we can't control the environment the kid lives in. You can't even control the kid's mentality.
I know. Well, that's why I think we think that, but a lot of people totally miss that because they had happy childhoods or they had happy whatever. But I think we both had the experience of feeling an adversity that our parents couldn't understand necessarily, and having every chance in the world, like having a good family and everything. But personally, I was depressed. I was chronically depressed from the age of about 4 to about 16 or something. And that is the thing that makes me think most. I don't want to put someone else through that. And there was no reason for it. It was probably chemical or something, or,
Well, I just think that the whole idea of being a perfectionist. I mean, obviously, it's all on a scale of some kind. So, yeah, you would be having a kid in a world where your kid is going to be more sensitive to the stuff that exists. And so that sensitivity is going to be realized in a great deal more discomfort than you experienced. It's like a different mixture of oxygen. You know what I'm saying? It's like they're never going to be able to take the same breath that you take because they need a different ether. A different atmosphere to breathe. And
so where do you find joy then? Not purpose, but what makes you happy? Because I guess for me it's a lot of the little things. Like it's just like food, love, shelter to an extent. If you've got a nice secure place to live, that's what I do. What about you?
Obviously you'd need a comfy bed to lie in of some kind. Something. Yeah. You got to feel physically comfortable. And if you're not completely physically comfortable, you do have to have some kind of stimulation or something to keep your brain. You have to have a game to play, because
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
our nature is to play the game, is to play a
yeah.
game. So yeah, but you can create that in so many, those simple pleasures kind of thing. You could just say, oh, a game of catch, or sitting by a stream and making daisy chains or some other kind of, you can come up with lots of little passive moments of time that pass that are enjoyable, and so yeah, certainly I can find those. But all in all, I mean, if you take out the time you struggle with just thinking, just trying to make sense of it all, and at the time you might have some specific interest, like my current specific interest is physics. So now I have to learn all this stupid crap, that's tedious, just so I can complete my theory, so to speak.
Yeah,
So I have to do
yeah.
this work to acquire the competence to be able to make this argument the way it needs to be made, and so that's just work. So,
That's
so
great
that's
though.
part
I
of
love
like, well,
don't
yeah,
you
no,
love projects?
yeah, no, I don't, not anymore. I just want to get things. I want things done. I don't want things. I don't want to be. The doing doesn't have much. I don't get much out of the doing anymore. It's just the dunning I want. I want the done without the doing. It all seems like work. Seems like work to me now more than it ever has in my life. But that just might be because I'm just, like I said, I'm just. It's not that I'm futile, but I mean, there's a point where I just know in my brain that I'm playing a game to make this, consumable or tolerable. And that, whether or not it makes a difference is another question you have to ask yourself. Does it really matter if people get anything in the truth? Because most of the people don't want to hear the truth anyway. So even if you make a perfect model of the truth, people will throw rocks at it and break it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. Well, yeah. But yeah, I mean, I live and I'm okay. I'm not complaining. I wouldn't, I don't want to live some other life. So I'm not saying I don't find purpose in my existence, but it does seem like, it seems obnoxious. I mean, I don't look forward to waking up in the morning and say, oh yeah, another great day on Earth, because it all does seem kind of, yeah.
I do sometimes. I sometimes think another great day, but rarely. But sometimes that's what.
Yeah, I can't say it's not impossible.
This is good. Talking to you is good. I'm happy and I'm in a home. I'm not, lots of that. So sometimes I think my life's more positive than negative.
Yeah, well, that's why I tend to like, I guess, I mean, I hate to say I like it. I tend to fall into argument a lot. It's just the fact that it keeps you occupied. It separates you from your physical reality in a sense, because your brain is busy thinking of arguments or thinking why is she saying it that way and how do I say that? That's bullshit. And, my brain's working on the problem. And so I'm way too distracted to give a crap about how I feel. Where if you have time to think about it, then you start figuring out that, oh, I'm old. And, oh, I got a crink in my neck. And, oh, I have a misery here. And, I don't feel quite right. You know what I'm saying? You start figuring out reasons to say, shit, I want to go to sleep.
You're not old, though.
well, again, you can play with words, but I'm just saying that by an absolute standard. Trust me, yeah, I'm really.
No, you told me how old you are.
Yeah, I was born too old.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that one. Yeah. So who won this then? I think I won that.
Yeah. Well, if you count completely preposterous and illogical mush as having real mass, yes, you created more mush. But yes,
I'll take any victory. Yeah.
yeah. So I could do it that way. I guess it was a draw, but I don't. It's always difficult.
It's not a draw to you.
It would always be difficult to prove the point where you're going to say we know enough, right? I mean, how is the guy who says that when it's appropriate to say it? I mean, you don't think it's appropriate to say it yet, but how is the guy when it's appropriate to say it going to be able to say it with any more veracity than I'm saying it? Because somebody can always say, well, you haven't solved the gremlin hole yet. There's the gremlin loophole. You haven't solved that one. You haven't proven there's no gremlins. Even though I proved there was no fairies and I proved there was no Tinkerbell, I still haven't proved that one.
Well, if you work on your physics thing, you will gain, what's the credence? So there's a point to working on the physics thing. I hate that I think that way, but I've actually thought of it in that kind of maniacal kind of way, in just the sense that, ironically, I can get my ethical, my moral philosophy, quote unquote. I can get it heard, by gaining credibility on this
completely disconnected theory of physical reality. So it's just,
Yeah.
it would be a total irony that that's the way, that's the door that I went through, to get to the finish line, because it's just such a, it's like going under the football field and then popping up at the goal line. It's like I did this mole trick where I totally fooled them,
Yeah.
by going under the field.
That's often how it happens. Well, that's sometimes how it happens. Yeah.
So yeah, but I hate that I think that way, but I actually do think that way. That, oh yeah, this is convenient, because I spend a year, I win a Nobel Prize, and then I'm instantly credible. I have instant credibility, and
Yeah.
everybody will say, oh yeah, yeah, well you have to try. Yeah, Gary was right about that shit, so he must be right about that shit too. So I won't even have to make
Did
an
you do?
argument anymore. I'll just tell people what to do, and they'll do it.
I
you
know.
know,
Well, like,
you
that'll
know,
be really.
Gary
You do have,
says, it'll be on
you
like
do
a
have
bumper
lots of
stickers. Gary says, it'll be written on bumper
you got a
stickers.
lot of followers. You got people like that already.
Well, I just don't want to even talk about that. But yeah, I have, yes, I have people who it rings true to, right? But obviously it's not, in a sense, converting the people who it rings wrong to, and that's the ones you have to get to. You have to get to the people where they don't get the sound, they're not getting that frequency. So I mean, getting the ones that it's gonna, you have a harmonic with, that's too easy.
Yeah.
You have to get to the people with a mechanism that just is so, I use the analogy of a skeleton key. You have to have the argument or the statement that is so clear that nobody can screw it up. It's just automatically going to unlock the brain.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I look forward to this thing. You have to get it done so that I can read it.
Read? No, 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 no.
Whatever. The
Yeah,
whole
yeah, no,
thing.
I'm just joking. But yeah, I do tend to just talk everything instead of write anything. But yeah, I know I have to write some stuff. Um, but yeah, I do have a physics channel. I don't know whether you saw the physics channel.
What's it called?
Draft Science.
Yes,
Oh,
I've,
okay,
I've looked
okay,
at some of that, and
okay.
I like. You see, that's what I like about your stuff. You're a prolific thinker on everything. Like I saw one today on education where you were saying a theory about education that people should be given the money individually, etc. And there's a whole people have to go and look at that if they want it. But that's a good idea, man. That's a good and there was you think about also you seem to know about the economy and whereas I'm really limited to what I'm interested in. I don't know about politics or the economy, and it's within my grasp. I just don't have the interest. So it's cool when people think on everything.
Yeah, I don't know if it's everything, but I try to find anything that's important. If it's important, then I say, yeah, it needs a theory of right and wrong, in terms of what's the basic. I mean, it's really just a mechanical thing, I mean, I'm kind of a straight line lover, and the idea of straight lines, and there's straight lines between these things, and the human race just loves the middleman. It just loves to make the noise and the small print and the bullshit and the nonsense. But there's kind of a straight line between problem and solution. If you
Okay.
accurately diagnose the problem, then you can find something that's a cure rather than a band-aid.
Yeah.
And then that's what you're always after, is the cure, not treating symptoms, but treating the disease. And every problem as treated as a disease.